As soon as we're live, I'll start.
We are.
Okay, so Senate Government Operations, Wednesday, March 10th. And we have one order of business that we have to take care of that I thought we'd taken care of yesterday. I was mistaken. S-107, which is the bill that we did around the juvenile arrest records. I thought was sent to us, and so we voted on it yesterday, but in fact, it turns out it was sent to Judiciary for some reason. And so Senator Sears had it sent to us today. So now we do have it. So now we can vote again. So does anybody want to make a motion?
I would move.
I'll let Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we vote out S-107.
Thank you. So would you, Senator Rahm, would you like to call the roll?
Sure.
Sorry, may I just clarify the motion?
The motion is to vote out 107, S-107.
Favorably? Yeah, I guess otherwise we wouldn't be voting out, right?
Right.
All right. We know what we're voting on. Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Polino.
Yes.
Myself, Senator Rahm, yes. Senator White.
Yes.
And that have passed S-107 favorably out of committee on a vote of 4-1-0.
Thank you. I apologize for that. I sent Secretary Bloomer a note and said, did all what I was supposed to do, and said we voted it out, and here was the vote. And he said, well, I'm happy that you voted it out, but it wasn't yours to vote out. You didn't have it. So thank you. Okay, so with that, let's move to S-51. Oh, before we start today, I'm going to say that originally we had S-43 on the schedule, but there's concern that by dealing with it now and passing it now, there might be, it might look like we're interfering with the current negotiations going on with the treasurer. And we never had that intent, but to just allay those fears, we're going to not deal with it until this particular issue is resolved. So everybody has been notified that we're not going to do that. And so it isn't on our schedule for today. Just wanted you to know why it was taken off. Any questions about that, committee? Okay, thanks. So then let's go to S-51. And do we have, is Ameren with us?
She has not joined us yet, Senator.
Okay, well, I think that we can, it is posted and there is an amendment to it. And I think we can just start looking at it because it's not a very complicated bill and many of us have dealt with it last year. So if I think what I'll do is I'll start with Paul Burns and then Deb Bilodeau and then Will. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sure.
All right. So if you want to just tell us why we should not be addressing this and address both parts here, because there's the actual contribution section and then there's the study that was added to it.
Right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Paul Burns. I'm the Executive Director of VPIRG, the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. I did provide testimony earlier on the underlying elements of the proposed legislation, which was, and that the committee will recall, is essentially limiting political contributions so that they can come only from individuals, meaning essentially human beings, or trusts that are controlled by a single human being, political parties, or political committees, also known as political action committees. The idea here is that we are, in limiting the contributions to those entities, we are not allowing, would not be allowing contributions to come from corporations, nonprofit or for-profit, directly from unions or any other entities, LLCs, et cetera, that could be created primarily for use in the marketplace, but as we know, can be used to influence campaigns as well. Vermont is one of the states that still allows direct contributions from candidates to, from corporations, for instance, to individual candidates and to political parties. 22 states have prohibited that practice, as has the federal government. And while we know that this is not a perfect solution to the problem of influence of big moneyed entities in the political process, it is, we believe, an important step to do what we can, what has clearly been allowed by the courts in multiple jurisdictions, all the way up to the Supreme Court. There really is no question about the constitutionality of this limit. We would simply be having Vermont join the many states that have already taken this step. So that's the contribution side of S51. The Senate has passed that, I believe, 3 times separately in the past. The House has not taken it up yet for a full vote of the House. Last year, it did make it out of the House Government Operations Committee, but then never had the opportunity to reach the floor when COVID kind of struck. So that's as far as it has gotten, was in the 2020 year. But again, has enjoyed pretty broad support among senators when it has come to the floor for consideration. The other proposal that is now would be an amendment to this bill would look at what I consider to be the other side of the coin. If we are saying we would prefer not to have our campaigns financed by corporate entities and others, and instead want to lift up the voices of regular people as much as we can, that we should be looking at systems and models that seem to be working reasonably well to do that. And here I'm referring to what we have commonly called public financing of campaigns. In Vermont, we had the first public financing of campaigns in legislation that Senator Polina is familiar with, as he helped to craft this as an advocate back in 1997, I believe, and he can correct me if I have the year wrong. And that legislation created Vermont's public financing system, which we have today, which can be used by top candidates for Vermont's top offices if they go out and gather a certain number of qualifying contributions, small contributions from many individuals, and that allows them to receive public financing in the state. The first time that it was used, public financing was used for any statewide officer was, I believe, Doug Racine's run for successful run for lieutenant governor, it has been used a few times since then. But it has not been used recently. And there are a number of problems with our public financing law now. It is seen as not providing enough resources for the most part for candidates to run robust campaigns. And there are other challenges with it. The time that you can't announce your candidacy until middle of February, for instance, if you're a publicly financed candidate or hope to become one. And again, other challenges that the system faces. But in the meantime, since 1997, there have been a number of jurisdictions, municipal and statewide around the country, that have adopted systems that seem to have certain advantages over ours. And the point of this study would not be to make any immediate changes to our public financing system, but instead to look at what else is out there, because we now have a system that is not being used. And almost any observer would say it really doesn't work well. And so why not look at systems like the Democracy Dollars program in the city of Seattle, for instance, which is a way of encouraging more people to participate in the process by giving them essentially vouchers that they can use and make contributions to candidates. And what has been found there is that 80% of, it's a very large percentage, I find you the statistic, but a large percentage of people who use these things had never given a campaign contribution before. And that's the idea, is that you're allowing more people to participate in the process of helping to fund campaigns, endorse and support candidates who didn't have the wherewithal, the personal capacity to do that in the past. And we also know is that individuals who take the time to give a contribution of any size to a candidate, they are more likely to then participate in the voting process because they feel invested and involved and engaged. And the other thing is that a poll in Seattle found that 75% of the residents there thought that that system was working well. They now have at least two cycles where it has been used in 2017, 2019, and I'm not sure what their calendar for use is in 2021, but I assume it's going to be used again there this year. So that's a pretty good system. There are others, though. Maine has a statewide program. Arizona has a statewide program. Connecticut has a statewide program. And we could examine and look at what might work and consider how it might work for Vermont. And that's the idea behind the study that would be added to S51 under this proposed amendment. So the underlying bill would be to say, we know we don't want to see more money and influence coming from corporate entities. We want to lift up the voices of real people. And then the other side of this would be, let's look at public financing as one way of doing that, and not necessarily just taking it out of the general treasury, but perhaps in a creative system like these vouchers, you're doing more to engage with voters and potential political supporters. And that seems to be a system that has some promise. So that is, I think, fairly simply the idea behind that proposed amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And this study was part of S32 last year, which we passed, but it had more in it. It had more details around timing of announcement and stuff like that. But all we're putting in this year is the study. That's right?
That's right. And I would say, for just to be clear, VPIRG supports this language, supports the language of the study. I think we would be happy to participate in the process in any way that we could be helpful. The other elements of S32 in the last biennium would have made some of the changes that I was referring to, but probably our system needs more fundamental change to be really effective. And so I understand the rationale behind limiting the amendment to the study, and we are supportive of that. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Paul? Deb, would you like to? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Rom.
Well, just to sort of say on the record, having questioned some small elements of how people might have a coffee shop gathering, and Paul was kind enough to get me more information about, generally making a good faith effort to pay someone market value at a small establishment to, be in that relationship with them for your campaign events, et cetera. And knowing from Paul that there are no other kind of exemptions like that in other states, I'm fine sort of letting that inquiry go. I just wanted to say that for the record. I'm satisfied that this is something candidates can work out.
Thank you. Any other questions for Paul? All right, Deb, would you like to join us and weigh in on this one? And you are muted. You're still muted.
How's that?
There you go.
All right. Thank you, Senator White.
Yep.
Thank you for inviting me today. I have to admit, I'm a little delinquent here. I have not read the study that you're referring to. I did read the bill. Much of what Mr. Burns said was good information, good feedback. The only thing that I see in the bill is the elimination of corporate contributions. I'm not sure that system is broke. I haven't seen anything that implies to me that it's broke in the short 10 years I've been involved in politics. So I for one, don't support eliminating corporate contributions. We're a very small state. And I know that Mr. Burns, referred to Maine and Arizona and Massachusetts and maybe Connecticut, I can't remember. But our resource pool is extremely small in the state of Vermont. We don't have millions of people and large corporations to turn to with regards to contributions to candidates' campaigns. I have not seen an abuse of anything unless something has occurred and I haven't heard about it. So the only feedback I have for you is that I don't see what's broken here, so I'm not sure what we're trying to fix. Thank you.
I think just to clarify one thing, I think here that while we are limiting the direct contribution from corporations, many corporations set up PACs, and those PACs would be eligible to contribute. So they just have to have the name of their corporation in their PAC somehow to identify them. So any corporation can still contribute, but through their PAC.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for Deb? Thank you. Will, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. Thank you, Senator White. I'll let you know that I wasn't aware that we would be addressing the amendment until just prior to the committee meeting, but at the same time, it's an amendment I'm familiar with and that we've discussed in the past, including last year with this bill. But just didn't have my notes, my talking points written down on that amendment to my defense.
I bet you can wing it.
Otherwise, no, I can. And I will keep this brief. I know you guys are pressed for time this afternoon. Our office generally supports the underlying bill, as we did when it was last in front of you all. From my perspective as the director of elections, I don't weigh in on the policy choice about whether or not it makes sense to ban corporate contributions to candidates. But from my perspective as the administrator, again, it really doesn't have any effect on my administration of the campaign finance system, so I'm fine with it in that regard. As we mentioned before, just for those new to the discussion, I think it was really intelligently crafted such that we didn't get into and down the wormhole of trying to figure out what types of corporations could and could not contribute. Instead, the bill takes sort of the opposite approach of saying who can contribute to a candidate instead of who can't. And I think from my perspective, giving advice and guidance to people trying to navigate the law, that makes it easy and clear. So I like that aspect of the bill, that it just says PACs and parties can contribute to candidates, and that's it, and individuals, sorry. The requirement for PACs to identify their connected organization really doesn't have a large effect on my administration of the process either. We're going to have to add a new field to the registration form for PACs online, which is an online form that's fairly simple that will allow them to identify the connected organization. But then all of the analysis of whether a PAC has appropriately identified a connected organization or not identified one when they should have, I just want to make clear to the committee, will fall to the Attorney General's office. My office doesn't audit the reports or investigate them or have any enforcement authority over them. And I think you took testimony from the Attorney General's office last time through on this provision, but it would be them that would speak to the ability to enforce that part of the new law effectively. Otherwise, it has very little other effect on my office. So we're okay with the underlying bill as it's written and support it. As for the amendment, I think also we generally support that amendment. Secretary Condos has been clear in the past, although I did not have a chance to huddle with him before this meeting, that he supports the concept of public financing. I know that he has routinely
Did my thing go out, or did Will just freeze?
No, Will's did.
Will froze up.
Will,
he's
you
asked
just,
about it.
He's back.
there you go. I think he turned off his
I
video.
turned off
now.
my video. Can you hear me now a little better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We,
And where
we
did you
lost-
lose me? And I'll wrap it
we
up
lost-
quickly.
We did lose you for a bit.
talking about the secretary.
Yep.
So just that he's been clear, he supports the concept, but he thinks it's very important to figure out the funding mechanism. Every time he's asked about that, that's one of the primary points he makes. So it's good that that's included as one of the charges of the committee. So we support the amendment as well. I'll leave it at that.
Any questions for Will? And Will, nobody ever gets to huddle now. How do you get to huddle with anybody?
Virtual huddle.
Oh, virtual huddle. Okay, great. Allison, Senator Clarkson, did you have a question?
I do. Will, can you tell us the last person who used public financing?
Oh, golly. Paul may be able to better answer that than I believe it was Dean Corin.
Yeah.
I think it was too.
I think that's the answer. Yep.
Thank you.
A member
That
of your
was
committee
it.
has used it a few times as well, if you'd like that perspective.
Sorry, who has?
Senator Polina.
Senator Polina.
Oh, yes. Have you used it since Dean Corin?
No, I used it back in 2000, I think.
Right.
Year
but-
Only-
2000.
Only governor and lieutenant governor qualify for it. So since Anthony has been in the Senate, he hasn't been able to use it even
Right.
if he wanted to.
Right.
And
I would say,
Dean's-
what?
Go ahead, Senator
I was
Polino.
going to say, since you asked, or you almost asked, I mean, it really provided an ability at the time to run a pretty strong campaign without having to accept any private money. I mean, what you do is you collect qualifying contributions. So some people would come into our office and give us 50 cents or $1, $5, and they would feel really connected to the campaign. And when we accumulated enough of those qualifying contributions, we received money from the campaign finance fund. So we were able to run a pretty strong campaign for particularly a first-time candidate without any private money. So it worked. It's outdated now. I agree with what Paul was saying, but at the time it worked okay.
Senator Clarkson, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember the year that Dean ran because I was in the House and I feel like it was 2010 or was it 12? No,
I don't
I
think
don't
it was
remember.
12.
I think
I
it
don't
was 12. Yeah. Well, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments or concerns about this bill? All right. Does anybody feel like making a motion?
I would move that we vote, what number is it now? S51 out favorably.
No, first we have to
Oh,
vote
first
to
we have to
amend
amend
it.
it. I would move that we amend S51 with draft. What draft number are we, Ameren?
I believe 1.1.
One with 1.1.
Let me double check.
Is that okay?
It is 1.1.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so with draft
Okay.
1.1.
Okay. Senator Ram, would you like to call the roll? You know, and there's always a question here about whether we need seconds on
Right.
these or not, and committees do not need seconds
Right.
on
We-
anything.
Gail,
Except helpings. We need second
This-
helpings sometimes.
I read my Masons all the time. I love them. Anyway, okay.
We know that about you.
Gail, are
Senator
you ready
Ram?
to help me capture the back end of this? I'll touch base with Gail after we're done. Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collmore,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself, Senator Ram, yes. Senator White,
Yes.
great.
And now I would move that we vote out S51 favorably. As amended.
As amended.
As I added that, as amended. I amended my motion. As amended.
Great. I will commence to call the roll. Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Collmore,
No.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
myself,
Did you-
Senator-
I'm sorry, I didn't know if I spoke loud enough. I said yes.
oh yeah, I think we heard you.
We heard you.
All right, sorry about that.
Senator Rom, yes. Senator White.
Yes.
Okay, so it was amended on a vote of 500, passed out of committee as amended on a,
410.
and whose
Oh,
report I think
yeah.
is the last thing we need.
sorry. Senator Colmore, did you have a comment?
If you wanted to finish who's reporting, I would like to make a comment now.
Would somebody, Senator Polina, would you like to report this?
I'm willing to.
Yeah, I think he's the
Unless-
perfect
Does
person.
somebody else want to? I assume Senator Colmore, you don't want to report it.
Paul
No,
might want to.
No, but you know what? It's your baby. And part of it is your baby from the beginning, Polina. So I think it would be lovely if there's certain sort of, you'd be the
Je ne sais
natural
quoi.
person. Certain-
You have the most experience with public campaigns.
Since we passed it 3 times already.
I know.
Well,
May-
Amarin, you can make a summary?
You might want to just stand up and say ditto last year. Find the
Right.
date that you reported it last year or whoever reported it and say ditto. Anyway, okay. So you will report.
Sure.
Okay, Senator Colmore, did you want to?
yes, and thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't think it should come as any surprise that I voted the way I voted on the bill itself. But I do feel that there is much to be said about doing a study about public financing. I certainly don't have any issue with that. And I think the amendment was well drafted. The 5 people that will serve on that committee seem to make sense. As Will Senning pointed out, there's also a charge to find out how to fund it, which makes, I'm sure, Secretary Condo's happy, because otherwise he'd be probably trying to figure out how to do it from his office. But I do think it's a legitimate thing to consider. But I do feel strongly that I enjoy corporate contributions and I like them. So I voted them. So with all, and again, Anthony, you and I go way back on this, and you
Sure.
and I spend 8 hours a day together in the legislature since we're on both committees together, and we have been since I came in. And with the utmost respect, I just want to let you know I wanted to go along with you, but I couldn't. I'm surprised that you're not the lead sponsor this time. Senator Perchlik was, which kind of
Yeah,
surprised me.
Perchlik or Pearson, I forget which, but yeah, I don't know why that turned out that way, but
Did you just give up the fight or?
no. Peas in a pod.
Okay. Thank you.
Alphabetical.
I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And I will say that I also have enjoyed corporate donations. I've not ever turned them down, but I'm happy enough to have the corporations that want to donate to me form a PAC and do it that way. I'm not a purist. So
I've
And
never
I-
taken a corporate contribution.
I've never
Hmm?
taken a corporate contribution either.
Jeanette knows this. I got one in the mail one time and it was from a local corporation. And I went across the street to where they were headquartered and I said, I don't take corporate contributions. They said, oh, sorry. So they took it back and then they just wrote me individual checks from the people who ran the corporation and they donated that way as individuals.
yeah, so I have no problem taking them. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of wealthy friends or family, and so I don't mind, but I'm happy doing it this way. So, okay, S51, we're done with that. Are we on to S7? Thank you very much for joining us. And I don't know,
Will
We-
has his hand up.
yeah, just 1 second
sorry.
though. We are going to jump to S78 now, but when we're done with that, we have 2 amendments to S15 that are being presented to us, one by Senator Benning and one by Senator Parent. So for those of you who are interested in the elections bill, we'll be coming back to that, but we had already scheduled S78 before we knew that they had amendments to bring to us. So just wanted to let you know that you're certainly welcome to stay with us for this. But if you want to not stay, you're welcome to come back in. Will, did you have a question?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes. So we will jump now to S78, and then we'll jump back to kind of elections issues. Sorry about jumping around, but this week is, we have to be a little bit flexible. So S78, we've had testimony on that, and we'll hear one more time from the judiciary and from the VSEA, and I believe we had Tim Noonan scheduled, but Gail, am I right? He can't come until 3?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, so we can have some conversation about it now, and then he'll join us at 3. He's in the middle of a hearing. Okay, so have people thought more about this? Do you have questions? We'll just open it up again to, so I think what I'll do this time is start with Steve Howard and then jump to Pat Gable. Does that make sense?
Fine.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, so take it away, Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Steve Howard. I am the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association, and we represent the classified employees who work for the judiciary, who, like their brothers and sisters in the executive branch, would like the option to choose arbitration with an independent arbitrator rather than going to the labor board when there is a dispute about contract resolution and negotiations. The reason that the Vermont State Employees Association supports that approach, and we appreciate the chair who actually developed the option where parties could choose one or the other, is because our members believe that the process needs to be independent, that the arbitrator offers the opportunity for somebody who has no political connections to the governor, doesn't have any biases one way or the other, is truly a professional who does this for a living and knows what how these processes work and does really the significant research that needs to be done to figure out what a fair outcome would be. So we're strongly supportive of a change in that system. We're not interested in reforming the process for going to the labor board. We think that process is too far gone. It is heavily stacked towards management. In the administrator, I think, talked a little bit about the committee that sends names up to the governor for appointment. If you look at that committee, there's only one labor representative, and the other representatives, including the administrator, are almost all managers. So it's heavily biased against workers. So we would like to not have that option forced on us, and instead have the option similar to the executive branch that allows us to choose an independent person. Now, most of the arbitrators who are used in this process aren't even from Vermont. There are some in Vermont, but most of them are not even from Vermont, and that gives them a level of perspective and independence that leaves our members with confidence that this is not a backroom political deal. That a few years ago, we had a contract that was decided by the labor board that our members really felt was a backroom political deal. So I won't rehash that, but it was historic in nature, and it left members feeling like the whole process was rigged. The other important element, I think, is that the arbitrator, almost like a jury, going to an arbitrator is is a big risk, especially if you're not certain, you don't have a hunch that they would vote with you. And what that does is it serves as a hammer for both parties to come to an agreement. Now, we've been able to come generally to an agreement once we've gone to a mediator with the judiciary. But we believe that consistency, we may not always be in a position where we can come to an agreement. And we think that there should be consistency between the bargaining teams, and that this really serves as a way of having the collective bargaining process be taken seriously by both parties on both sides, and to really force the parties to work as hard as they can to come to an agreement at the table, which is preferable. I think the legislature prefers that. We certainly prefer that. I think management probably would say they prefer that. We have found in our experience in the executive branch that the bargaining process has gone much more fairly and smoothly and been taken more seriously by the administration once arbitration was an option than it was prior to that. So we would encourage that, since it's worked so well with the executive branch, that the construct that I believe the chair developed on the envelope that she drew, where you could choose, really is something that should be expanded to the judiciary.
So before we jump to Pat and any questions for Steve, I should have thrown this out at the very beginning. And I guess one of my major questions is treating all state employees the same. I mean, we have one system in the executive branch now, and I know we're three different branches of government, but they're all state employees. So that if when you talk about this, if you could address that just a little bit. And but first I'll go to the committee for any other questions for Steve, and then if both you, Steve, and Pat can address that when you speak. Committee? I don't see any, so. I thought that was Senator Polina's hand, but I see it's flowers. Sorry. My bifocals don't work well at this range. So Steve, would you like to just address that a little bit, and then we'll jump to Pat and for her input and ask the same question?
Sure. So we do believe that having this option, this choice, be consistent with the judiciary and the executive branch is an important process. Our members have expressed a strong desire to have this provision, this choice that is offered. They believe it will make the process of collective bargaining really much more effective, and assures the members that it really is an independent, professionalized approach to coming to an agreement in the collective bargaining process.
Thanks. So Pat, would you like to weigh in?
Actually, I'd like to defer to Joe McNeil,
Oh,
our
sure.
chief negotiator, who
Sure.
has a lot of experience in this area.
Sure, thanks. Joe?
Thank you, Senator White and members of the committee. Try to be brief. We did have opportunity to testify last time, and just a couple of supplementary points. Number one, I would point out that there actually is no experience on the executive branch side with using private arbitrators for last best offer because it hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. And to say that the incentive of private arbitrator, of having a private arbitrator rather than the Labor Relations Board was the primary catalyst for settlement in the last round. As chief negotiator for the executive branch, I would take issue with that and point out the fact that most contracts, very frankly, are settled rather than having to be resolved through last best offer. There's only been 3 situations that I'm aware of over the history of bargaining where last best offer in the executive branch. And as we said last time, none in the judiciary have been used. The next point I would like to make is that the judiciary does not take exception to the notion of the parties having a choice and trying to work out among themselves on a, if you will, negotiating by negotiating round basis as to whether the labor board or the a private arbitrator was used. The notion of an option would be perfectly fine with us. What we take exception to is the fact that ultimately in this bill, it's not an option unless both parties agree to use the board. And we think there is nothing in the board's historic jurisprudence that warrants this, what amounts to a condemnation of its impartiality and its expertise and its means of resolving important matters. As was pointed out last time, the board retains jurisdiction over unfair labor practice charges. It retains jurisdiction over grievances, both in the executive branch and in the judiciary. So that it just seems that simply because one party indicates that a process, one LBO procedure was quote unquote rigged, that doesn't make it so. We've heard the term rigged used in another context fairly expansively in the last several months. And I think experience has taught that saying it doesn't make it truthful. Steve's certainly entitled to his perspective, and I don't mean to undermine that a bit. But I think from the perspective of someone who is on the other side, that wasn't our impression, and just leave it at that. The last point I will make is hopefully a worry, if you will, a practical worry. And that is that the labor board currently has a methodology for dealing with last best offers. They don't hear them de novo. What their jurisprudence is that they rely heavily on the fact-finding process that precedes the last best offer. They take the transcript from the fact-finding process. They take the exhibits and testimony that were presented at fact-finding, and they allow, if there is new information that has developed between fact-finding and arbitration, they allow that to come in by affidavit. But the process involves oral argument rather than a complete do-over of the fact-finding process. And the worry that we have from a practical standpoint is that if both fact-finding and then last best offer are de novo proceedings, like will be the case under this statute, one of two things are going to happen. Either we're afraid that one party or the other will not put its best case forward at fact-finding, but will hold things in reserve for the tactically for the last best offer proceeding. Or alternatively, if both parties are going to put their best case forward, the expense could be significant and would be duplicated. And just one example of this is that the most prolonged proceeding we had in the history of judiciary bargaining was like 2 or 3 rounds back relating to a particular issue that a particular series of issues that caused us to be 5 hearing days in fact finding. The bill that resulted from that fact finding procedure was approximately $36,000 that was split 50-50 between VSEA and the judiciary. The worry is that if we're doing fact finding and then LBO with private arbitrators, that will have one of 2 of those possible effects. I agree with Steve that hopefully the great incentive of having last best offer arbitration, whoever hears it, or whoever is scheduled to hear it, is an incentive towards settlement, because the judiciary certainly has had a history of reaching settlement and would far prefer to reach settlement by direct negotiations. But those are the points that we would like to make supplemental to last time. And thank you, committee members, for your indulgence.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, but committee members, do you have any questions first? Senator Clarkson?
Joe and Steve, I'd love, we talk about the cost of moving to an independent arbiter. What is roughly the average cost of using the labor board of a normal process?
The normal process, if I may, Steve, the normal process is embedded in your creation and funding of the board.
Right.
Neither party is charged per case, so it's difficult to draw a direct comparison. I would say that in a typical, if we took a typical LBO proceeding before the board, which would be accomplished in a one day. I don't know that would be the case if it was de novo, but let's say one day. If that was an arbitrator, that would be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 for that arbitrator's time. Then they would typically need 1 to 2 or 3 days of writing, preparation and writing. And so, 2,000 to 3,000 times 2 or 3 divided by 50% to each party would be that cost. But the worry from the judiciary standpoint is that would not be a single day hearing if it was being done de novo.
Thanks. Yeah.
Steve, did you want to respond to that, or?
So I think what I would just say is, the VSEA has far fewer resources than the state of Vermont or the judiciary, and we are willing to put our money into a process that we believe in, a process that's independent and fair and professional, and one that we know has our experience. That Mr. McNeil is correct. We haven't had to use the arbitrator in last best offer because of the potential risk to both parties of going to an arbitrator. And therefore, we came to an agreement at the table, which I think is really important. So for the folks who work in state government, this is a minor investment in a process, and having a process for a contract that they believe in, that's independent and not seen as political.
So a couple questions came, or observations came up for me. And I don't, whether or not the settlement was rigged, as you say, I don't know that it was or wasn't. If there was any back room dealings or not, but the perception by the employees was that it was. And I think we need to have a workforce that has faith in the system, because if we don't, then our workforce isn't going to be as faithful to us. So I think that the fact that many of the employees felt that there was some hanky-panky or whatever, however you want to term it, that it was not entirely fair and above board is important. The other thing that two observations that I thought was, there is an option to going to the Labor Relations Board, but it's only an option if both parties agree to it. And if it isn't an option, if both parties don't agree, I mean, you have that option, but if one party doesn't agree to that, then it's taken off the table. So in order to exercise that option, you're going to have to also have some negotiations around agreeing to do that. And then I guess my main concern is that if we have only gotten to that point a couple times, as far as anybody can remember, then what is the resistance, the main resistance to it? Because if we're not getting there anyway, it is setting up a system for the few times that we may have to get there, but for the most part we don't. So it isn't imposing something on all of our negotiations.
Just if I may, very briefly,
Mhm.
Madam Chair, the reason that the Judiciary Department continues to prefer the VLRB is because, as Pat testified, Administrator Gable, excuse me for being too informal.
Yes, please.
Yes, I did the same thing. Sorry.
Testified at the last session. The judiciary has seen both the informal and the formal side of VLRB practice. It likes the fact that the VLRB has a stenographic record. It likes the fact that it has the publication of its decisions, which can guide it for the future, that its precedents become guides. It likes the informal aspect of the interaction with the board's executive director, and where literally a review of the strengths and weaknesses of each party's case occur, and then a sort of informal mediation occurs, and that results in on many occasions with, and not just LBO, but across the board's jurisprudence, whether it be grievances or unfair labor practices, it does result in settlements, which are to be encouraged. So it's not so much that we, the judiciary fears the private arbitration process, and there may be times when it would be inclined to say yes, but the way the bill is structured, we would not be able to use the VLRB unless the other side concurred. But we would be forced to use private arbitration regardless of whether we concurred. And that is the reason that we prefer the current statute.
So I was just thinking, what if the Labor Relations Board was made up right now of Steve Howard, Vince Aluzzi, Dennis Labonte, Anthony Polina, and me? Would you still feel the same?
If we could take a peremptory charge on Aluzzi, we'd be good.
I'm just thinking, because that would be a board that would really be heavily stacked.
We might
Board.
join the judiciary on that.
Well, I threw his name in because I saw him sitting there, but really, I didn't want to invite him in at all, but.
No, I take your point, and more seriously, yes, if we had every reason to believe that on a continuous basis, it was a stacked committee,
Mhm.
our view of it might change, but that has not been our experience directly in the judiciary, and speaking for myself indirectly because of executive branch experience.
Yeah, and I understand that. So committee, where are we here with this? Senator Polina?
First of all, I say Joe makes a pretty strong argument. I have to appreciate that. But on the other hand, I really don't see the downside of giving people the option of arbitration. And I also think it's important to keep in mind what you mentioned before, that right now the executive branch uses it, and I think we should be treating all the employees should have the same option in terms of the direction in which they want to go. So I would think having them join the same system, having the same system, as the executive branch makes the most sense. There's been no downside to it yet.
I'm going to interrupt here for a second. I see Gail's hand is up.
Madam Chair, appropriations is ready for you when you are ready for them.
Oh, I forgot that. Okay. Anthony, do you want to, I have to go over there and justify our elections bill.
Our election bill has money. Oh, it's for the cost of mail-out voting.
For the
Yeah.
$3 million for the election bills.
Right.
She's going to be a champion. You're going to be a brilliant advocate.
Okay,
And
so
Senator White, do you need the Zoom access information, or do you have that?
I think I got it. It's from Chrissy, right?
Yeah.
So
Would
I
this
have
be
to
a
leave
good
this-
moment,
What?
Madam Chair? Would this be a good moment for a short break?
That's up to Senator Polina because he's in charge now. So
Okay.
I just have to leave this meeting. Is that right, Gail?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I'll see you later.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't be-
Good luck. Knock 'em
Okay.
dead. Go
Okay,
for it.
Senator Polina, may I make a comment on your last observation? We do have a separation of powers. And in recognition of that, the judiciary has a separate labor relations law. It's not identical to the executive branch. There are reasons why the judiciary has different considerations. And we also separately collectively bargain. The governor is not part of the judiciary management. The Supreme Court administers the judiciary, not the governor. And so to the extent there may have been considerations that led the committee to recommend a change to the executive branch, those considerations don't exist in the judicial branch. And you might still say, well, what's the difference? I think as Joe and I testified last time, there are many disadvantages of private arbitration in comparison to the use of the Vermont Labor Relations Board. And I would ask you not to diminish the importance of having precedent, because what often happens is that the precedent that's published by the board about things that it does, and in general, the way it approaches cases really helps the parties in a way that sometimes mediators help the parties. In other words, the long-term goal of all of this is to have good relations between management and labor. And one of the best ways to have good relations is they have to both be required to come to agreements. If always there's a thumb on the scale, one side or the other, then you don't have good relations, because the parties aren't compelled to find a problem-solving answer that meets the needs of both. And I think the VLRB is very skilled in that area. And so I would ask the committee to consider the possibility that regardless of why you might have thought this was a good idea in the executive branch, that in the judicial branch, it's really a kind of prepackaged solution looking for a problem. We are already motivated to come to agreements with the union, and we do. And so the Supreme Court has the same desire as the other branches to be responsible with taxpayers' money. And in this case, the proposal is suggesting a duplicative privatization of an existing government function that is already funded and is already working really well. And so we understand that when things are not working well, it's important that we put our heads together and come up with a solution. And I would suggest that if there's something wrong with the way that the members of the Vermont Labor Relations Board are chosen, then that's where the process should go, because procedural justice requires, as the chair had said, that both parties believe they're going to get a fair hearing. And so if there's a sense that it's not a neutral process, that's a problem in itself. So thank you for giving me some time to follow up.
I appreciate those comments. I really do. Senator Rahm?
I guess what I would say is that what I've heard is that, you know, there isn't trust on the side of many of the employees of the current process, but I haven't heard anything from your end to say that you wouldn't trust this additional process, just that it would be expensive and add another layer. And I just have to wonder, you know, I know this is an important discussion to you and might in some ways save you money down the road, but you know, you're here in committee represented with counsel. It's probably very expensive to do that as well, you know, keep coming to committee and paying your counsel to be present. So, you know, it just feels like there are expenses to create a process that people trust to make oneself feel heard. You're spending some of that money today, and, you know, to have a process that's really trusted by both sides, you know, seems like a worthy expenditure. What I haven't heard in any sort of compelling or really explicit way is that you wouldn't trust this other process.
Joe?
Thank you, Senator Ram. I would just respond by saying that I have probably done as many private arbitrations as anyone in Vermont over several decades, and that I don't distrust the private arbitration process per se. I have had decisions that have been wonderfully well reasoned, thoroughly documented, et cetera, by private arbitrators, but I have also had decisions, and this doesn't reflect wins or losses, it's just the nature of the analysis. I've had decisions that have been cursory, slapdash, if you will. And so I guess the point we're trying to make is that the devil you see is not always worse than the devil you don't. And we do have confidence in the Labor Relations Board process. I'm hopeful that ultimately the state and the legislature has confidence in that process, because if you don't, you really should change it. But we haven't seen that. And so I don't want to take issue with Steve's point that, you know, number one, I don't take issue with his point that regardless of which method we use, the last best offer situation is an incentive to settlement, together with the desire of the parties to get along in reasonably good order. Number two, I don't take issue with the fact that there could well be very well-reasoned decisions, but I've seen it both ways. And and we're content with the system that does exist for judiciary employees. Thanks, Senator.
Senator, if I could respond to that, I see Senator Clarkson has a question, but
Yeah, Senator Clarkson, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry about
no,
that.
Steve has a response, so I'm happy to defer to.
so I guess,
Steve.
thank you. I appreciate that, Senator. So one of the things I just wanted to point out is in the process that where the labor board is formed, however you get to the process, the decision about who goes on that panel is made by one man or one woman, whomever is in the governor's office, obviously with the advice and consent of the Senate. In collective bargaining, the principle of collective bargaining is that the workers have the same, at this one moment, the workers and the management have equal power at the table. And when we go to an arbitrator, the arbitrator is mutually agreed to, both by management and by the workers. And that is a major difference between the current system in the judiciary, where you only have the option of going to the labor board, and one in which both workers and management have equal power in deciding who the arbitrator might be.
Senator Clarkson, did you want to comment?
Yeah, when we weigh these things, we obviously always want to begin with what's the problem we're trying to solve. So I guess I would ask Pat, how are your labor relations at the moment in judiciary? It's because I think that's part of the issue here. I mean, I'm just curious.
That's a big question.
It's a big question, but I know you've been working on them. So I'm just curious, and I know at least it's been represented as an issue in this committee. So I'm just curious, because your confidence in this, and I agree with you. All that you said, Pat, was very articulate. I mean, we have a taxpayer funded system now that we generally have confidence in. It depends on who the governor is. It goes back and forth as to who's appointed. It's our job as the Senate to really vet those appointees, and we did that last time, which is part of reason we're here where we are right now, because we had a real challenge with one of them. But so I'm just, I don't know. I agree with you that we have a system that ought to be neutral and fair, and that we have that one group has lost confidence in that is a problem for me. I would like to have everyone have confidence in that system that we are funding and we have a lot of investment in. And I don't know. Maybe I'm.
So to your, specific question.
Is that a question, Senator Clarkson?
No, my question is to Pat, how are labor relations in judiciary at the moment?
So we, there are many aspects of labor relations. And so we have, of course, we successfully reached a collective bargaining agreement the last go round. That was successful. We've had to negotiate with the union frequently during the pandemic as we tried to find ways to protect employees. We've been able to successfully reach numerous side letters as a result of that. It's interesting, negotiation, and which is really group decision making. I mean, that's really what negotiation is. And before I joined the government, and when I was in the private sector, I did spend a fellowship year studying and researching negotiation, after which I did teach it in an academic setting for some time. And one of the things I loved about that work, and it's a continuing practice, is that it really is group decision making. All the strategies and biases and all that humans possess become more complicated in an environment like labor relations. And I think there are many ways that we could have much better outcomes if we did interest-based bargaining, which is a very specific approach to negotiation that's very different from position-based bargaining. And I have a lot of experience in that. And one of the great things about interest-based bargaining is that the research shows that both sides actually get more of what they want than you get in position-based bargaining, because it requires people to reveal their interests in a way that doesn't happen in position-based bargaining. So I would be much happier with the labor relations in the judiciary if both parties were willing to really understand what that means, really go through training and practice it. But we also have to be realistic that we are in a, in a political context, and parties are going to do what they ultimately feel are in the interests of the people they represent. And so I would say, given the nature of our, current environment, I think the pandemic has been an incredible shock and challenge to our system and to individuals. We've very successfully worked through a lot of those issues. It doesn't mean everything's perfect, and we continue to do that. And my hope is, perhaps our ability to successfully go down that road will improve the environment for negotiations in the judiciary.
Thanks. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? I just would say that on our agenda, it says there's a possible vote on this bill today. Certainly not going to do that without the chair in the room. And I don't know whether we're ready to take a vote or not. I mean, some of us probably are, some of us probably are not. And we have another thing coming up on the schedule at 3:30. We're going to go back to the elections bill. And I want to try to keep us on track. This is a good conversation, and it really is one, but I'm not so sure that extending it any longer is going to make that much of a difference, to be perfectly honest, one way or the other. So I would suggest that we take a break. We come back in 10 minutes, all of us, if you folks are willing to stick around, and just make a decision as to whether or not we're going to take a vote or not, and do that one way or the other. And then that'll bring us to about 3:30, which is when we're supposed to switch gears and go looking at our other bill. Allison, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just, to go to Pat's suggestion and to go to what in some ways has triggered much of this discussion over the last 2 years. I'm just curious, when was the last time that the Vermont Labor Relations Board's processes was completely reviewed? Has it been subject to review given some of the concerns that have been voiced in the last 2 years? When was the last time it was overhauled or re-looked at? Or I'm just curious.
If I may, Senator Clarkson, I think your upcoming witness, Tim Noonan, is in the very best position to answer that question.
I know, but I didn't think he was here today.
Oh, I thought he was coming. I thought I heard the chair say he was coming at 3.
I thought I heard that too.
He will be joining us when he's available.
Yeah, he had another meeting to go to, and he was wrapped up in something and said he would get here. I think you're right, Joe. He said, I think I heard 3 o'clock, but so maybe he'll arrive anytime, any minute, maybe he won't, I'm not sure.
But happy to take a break until then, Vice Chair Polina. I'm just curious about that, and
Well, maybe what we'll do is take the break, and then if Tim is here when we get back, we'll talk with Tim for a good 15, 20 minutes or so, and then switch gears back to our other bill.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Excuse me?
Mr. Vice Chair, we actually did move up the proposed amendments to 3 p.m. because we took S43 off the schedule. So we did move it up, not to say that we can't have more speaking time to this, but I just wanted to let you know that we did change the schedule.
Right.
In terms of those amendments, we would be waiting for Senator Parent and Senator Benning, right?
They have joined us.
I believe one or both of them are here.
They're both here.
I hesitate to take up the amendments without the chair here, though, because it's
I-
really
I
her
agree.
bill. I mean, it's our bill, but it's really a bill that she's shepherding. So I kind of feel like we should wait for her to return before we take up the amendments.
I would agree.
Which brings me back to this idea of a 10-minute break, if that's okay with Senator Parent and Senator Benning.
Fine with me.
Okay. You're in quarantine anyway.
Yeah, I got nowhere to go.
Fine by me, Anthony.
Okay, great. So we'll take a 10-minute break. Come back at about